So you don't have to be a champion to be a winner. It's more than just a title. It is a very strong belief that I have in life, that there are too many people today led to believe that unless you are a winner out there and get a medal, you can't be considered any good. That isn't true. In sport, there will always only ever be one real winner, but that doesn't mean that you can't be successful. And it was the first round of a new category of racing, which is not particularly important at this moment. It's called Formula Ford, but it became one of the really good junior formulas. And I stood on a muddy bank at Brands Hatch watching these cars going round, and I thought, wow, I'd like a share of that. I can see myself in one of those cars. But of course, I imagined that it was very expensive and it was way out of my league. And so it would be just a little dream for a while. And then in 1967, something happened that really shook the world of professional sport. Colin Chapman, who was the boss of the famous Lotus Formula One team in those days, saw that there had been a change in the rules allowing advertising on racing cars for the very first time. It was an opportunity, and he grabbed that opportunity and negotiated what became known as sponsorship with the John Player Tobacco Company. And his two drivers, Graham Hill and Jim Clark, raced that year in the Formula One World Championship for the first time in cars that looked like cigarette packets, the Gold Leaf brand in this particular case. Now, there'd always been racing, Formula One racing and racing cars, but they used to be painted in the colours of the country. So Britain, British Racing green, Mercedes, Germany, silver, France, blue cars, and Italy, of course, with the famous red. But now advertising. And it was an activity sponsorship that shook the world and caused a revolution in sport. One day I was driving down the A20 in Maidstone, and I saw this sign at the side of the road: Victoria's nightclub opening on Friday the 15th of May, 1974. And I thought, wow, that's interesting, and carried on to my meeting. Later that evening, my mind went back to that board, and I decided to make a few inquiries. And I found that they were having a lunch on the 15th of May, a big business lunch, and they were going to invite a lot of the top businessmen from the region around Kent and Maidstone and that area. And an opportunity went through my head, and I thought, wow, I've got to do something about this. I've been looking to buy one of these low-price Formula Ford racing cars, a second-hand one, with the money I was making at Xerox. But I decided that I'd try something new. I went to the guy who had the car that I wanted to buy, and I said, can I borrow it for a day? And he said, what do you want to borrow it for? I said, I want to put it on a trailer and take it somewhere. So he said, as long as you don't take it off the trailer, of course you can. So I went to Victoria's nightclub on the day of the lunch. I got there about half an hour before I heard that it would be starting. And I drove the car and parked it with the trailer and the racing car on the back in the middle of the car park. Walked into reception and I said, can I see Mr. Gorkoff, please, who I'd found out was the owner of the club. And they said, what do you want to see him about? I said, I'd like to talk to him about a business opportunity. This guy walks out, and I'm not joking, he was 6'8", 6'9" tall. And he didn't look very happy when he came out. He walked over to me and he said, is that your something, something, something racing car parked on that trailer in the middle of the car park? I've got a business lunch on, and I've got all these people coming out, arriving now, and you're parking right in the middle of the car park. Take the, and he described the car in even worse words, away. And I said to him, look at all the people now arriving. What are they doing? They're walking over to look at the car, because you don't often see a racing car in the middle of a car park at a nightclub. And I said, can you imagine if we had that car emblazoned in your very distinctive colour scheme and livery in the shopping mall on a Saturday morning in Maidstone, with a promotional person selling subscriptions and membership at the club, what it would do for your club? He said, get the F- car out of here, handed me his business card and said, come and talk. 2 weeks later, I had done my first sponsorship deal with Victoria's nightclub. I decided to go and visit my folks. They lived in Johannesburg. And it was the winter now. I'd stopped racing for the season and booked a ticket to fly down to Johannesburg. And I had a phone call from my parents to say that they'd managed to get me a ticket for the South African Formula One Grand Prix at the Kyalami Grand Prix circuit. I booked the flight and headed off to South Africa, reading a magazine about motor racing, not surprisingly, on the way. And somebody next to me said, "I see you're reading a book about motor racing." And I said, "Yes." He said, "Do you do any?" And I said, "I've just started racing Formula Fords." And he said, "And where are you heading now?" I said, "I'm going to Kyalami." He said, "Well, that's amazing." He said, "Here's my card. When you get there, come and see me." Who was that man? It was Max Mosley, who went on to become the president of the FIA, the governing body of motorsport worldwide, and who at that time was the director of the March Formula One team, one of the teams that took place in the Formula One World Championship. That was an opportunity, and I could have done two things. I went to see him at the Grand Prix. I introduced myself yet again, made sure I got his business card, and I came away. And as you'll see, it didn't pay dividends straight away, but my goodness, did it pay dividends later, and you'll see how. It was an opportunity, and it was one to be taken. However, despite all that money, you never have enough in motor racing. And one day I was sitting watching television. Now, some of you might remember on BBC television a program called Are You Being Served? Grace Brothers, the departmental store, Mrs. Slocum, John Inman saying, "I'm free." You remember them? Well, it gave me an idea. I thought, there's something. The standard of people selling in retail stores is not that good. I'd had a discussion with some business people about that only a couple of weeks before this. So an idea came into my head, and I approached a man by the name of David Croft at the BBC. Now, David Croft, you might know, is the person who started and wrote Dad's Army together with Jimmy Perry. He also wrote Are You Being Served? He wrote Heidi High was another one of his, and many other very, very good comic sitcoms. And I came away from that meeting with the rights to produce training programs using the cast of Are You Being Served to make training programs for salespeople in stores. And I approached a company in London to do the production for me. We recorded with the cast of Are You Being Served at the Redwood Studios in London. They were owned by Michael Palin, ex-Monty Python. And in the process, one day I was at the studios, and Andre, the studio director, said, "Brian, while we're recording the Are You Being Served stuff, you might like to pop upstairs. Some of the Monty Python guys are there." Well, I went upstairs, walked into the room, and they'd obviously been prepared, and they turned around and said, "Hello, Brian." And they were sitting at a piano, and they said, "We're just writing a song about you." And of course, they were doing the music for The Life of Brian, which you may remember very, very well. And out of that, I got a meeting with John Cleese, and I was asked by him if I would write a script for one of the films that his company called Video Arts, a training film company, would make. And so things moved on, and it gave me a little bit more money to work with, but it was a fascinating experience. And once again, it was an opportunity that came from my approach and interest in selling as a professional skill. My racing skills on the track were probably not as good as they should have been. And it became pretty obvious after about 3 years that I wasn't going to make it to Formula One. I still wanted to continue. I wasn't that bad. I was getting quite good results, but not good enough. And I decided to go to South Africa and see if I could do some racing out there, go and spend a couple of years with my parents, look around the country, do some sightseeing and so forth. And I arrived in South Africa, and I saw that the Kyalami Grand Prix circuit was for sale. Yes, a Grand Prix circuit for sale doesn't happen very often. And so I put a phone call through to somebody who had sat next to me on a plane all those years ago 5 years ago. And I'd taken his business card, you may remember, at the Grand Prix. And I said, Max, it's Brian Sims. I don't know if you remember me. We met on a plane. And he said, yes, I do remember, Brian. I said, the circuit's for sale. What's happened? He said, well, it's actually been sold. Why do you want to know? I said, well, Max, maybe I can get involved, get a job there, do a little bit of race instructing or something like that. So he said, leave it with me, Brian. I'll find out. Next morning, I got a phone call from a guy called Bobby Hartsleaf, and he said, Brian, I'm the new owner of the Kyalami Grand Prix circuit in South Africa. Max Mosley has phoned me from England and said I should see you. How do you fancy a coffee this afternoon at the Kyalami Ranch Hotel next to the racetrack? We'll have a chat. Well, that's what happened. I went in at 4 o'clock, and at 6 o'clock, I came out as the manager of the Formula One Grand Prix circuit in South Africa. The Grand Prix in South Africa was called off at the last minute because of a driver's strike led by Niki Lauda. Wow, can you imagine the build up to this? We had 60,000 spectators had come up from all over South Africa, Angola, Rhodesia, all those places to watch the Grand Prix. They were not going to be happy bunnies when the Grand Prix was cancelled at the last minute. And the drivers went off, slept in a hotel on mattresses. Luckily, the Grand Prix eventually did take place, but it was a real baptism by fire, as you can probably imagine. And I persuaded the dealers that I would be the sales manager of the company of Honda in Cape Town, but also let's put a race car on the track. And I managed to win the championship in my first year. And so I was able to build quite a nice racing career. And then went on for about 5 or 6 years. And then eventually the day came when I was given the drive opportunity of my life to drive what they call a Le Mans Group C sports car powered by a Formula One engine in the last ever race to take part on the big Grand Prix International circuit in South Africa before it was modernized. And I put together a very big sponsorship and ended up driving in this particular race alongside people like Derek Bell, Jochen Mass, Jackie X, and so forth. And decided that was time probably to pull the curtain down on my racing career. And I realized that in South Africa, for young people coming through, particularly for young black kids and youngsters, it was very difficult to get into motor racing. Like anywhere, it's always expensive, but it was particularly difficult there. And so I went out and managed to get huge sponsorship. I took the opportunity and created a racing driver school, the first ever in South Africa. And it was called Kyalami Speed International. And we had PG Windscreen Group and Ford Motor Company sponsored the school. And it became really, really big. And I ran that successfully for 4 years. And he said, Brian, we are going into Formula One this year with our own car. And we'd like somebody to come and handle the marketing and sponsorship side for the team. Are you still as good as you used to be when you were racing in Britain at getting sponsorship? Because if you are, get yourself on a plane, you've got a job. And I became the marketing and PR director for Lola race cars. Things were moving on because of these professional selling skills, and my career was really moving in a direction that if you'd have asked me all those years ago to get to Formula One and be the marketing director of a Grand Prix team, I'd have said, no way. I came up with the idea of starting a Motorsports Industry Association to represent companies that operate in what was regarded as a world-leading industry. And I saw another opportunity and set up the Motorsports Industry Association, which in 2004 was 25 years old. And we managed to get our industry awards program at the House of Lords. And the MIA today has become one of the most powerful business organizations in world motorsport. And I'm proud to be one of its 4 honorary life members for having started the organization. And he said to me, Brian, we've just signed a deal with the Benetton Formula One team to be its sponsorship agency. And we need somebody who can come on board and get sponsorship quickly, because we've put down a £500,000 guarantee of money that we're going to get the deals. And so Would you be interested? Well, you know the answer to that question. I was on went up and met with Alan, and we signed the deal. And then it was out on the road, so to speak. It was a hard sell, because to go and find deals straight away, they take time. But within a very short space of time, an opportunity came along. The Benetton team said to me, look, Brian, we are going as a marketing department to present to Gillette. We go every year and we never seem to get anywhere. Would you like to come along and watch? So I took the opportunity to go along with them. And I watched the presentation and I thought, I'm going to learn so much from these people. I didn't. I sat there. I was so saddened by what I saw. It was a very poor presentation, appealing to one thing and one thing only: brand awareness. And Risto Myler, who was the European marketing director for Gillette, was in the room, and they were doing the presentation to him. And I made an excuse and stayed behind afterwards. And I said, Risto, you look bored during that presentation. He said, Brian, every year, every Formula One team literally comes to Gillette and presents some pictures with bigger and better pictures of the race car, all painted in Gillette colours. We don't need more brand awareness. We've got all the brand awareness we need. And if we did need more, we wouldn't do it on a racing car. Believe me, there are better ways of achieving it. So I said to him, Risto, can we meet up in a week or so and spend an hour just talking about some of the issues that face Gillette, and see if we can find some reasons why you should be in Formula One and how it might be able to help you sell more blades, more products, and so forth. And the outcome of that meeting was that I walked away with a £5.5 million deal, not literally at that moment, but I went away, and what I did was to forget the idea of branding on the car, and we designed instead an opportunity to give them the rights to make a lifestyle documentary series on television, the lifestyle of a Formula One team, looking at what it was like to be the marketing director, what it's like to be the person working on the pit crew, what it's like to be the trucking, what's it like to be the person organising the shipping of the cars, the logistics, the passports, laundry and everything else. And we got that and sold that idea to ITV in Britain, and took it to Sportel, the big sports conference, and offered every broadcaster who was prepared to show that series live on a midweek during the Grand Prix season that they would get it for free from Gillette, provided they gave Gillette top, tail and middle advertising slots for free. And we showed Gillette that they could save over £12 million on the budget they spent for TV product commercials as a result. And we did the deal. And it took 3 months from beginning to end. I'm a great believer that you don't have to be a champion to be a winner. I proved it. I wasn't a champion, but I believe I was a winner from my point of view, because I was able to achieve my dreams. And remember, with change come opportunities. It's what you do with those opportunities that matter.